one announcement. Just wanted to let you know, give you a little update on where Pastor Dean is right now. I think most of you probably got this on email, but there's a lot of people on the live stream that may not have gotten that. Right now, he's still in Kiev. He was tested positive for COVID when he went to get his pre-flight test. So now he's stuck there for 5 days. And so it's going to be a time where you can kind of relax and get some studying done. And so not to worry, he's just fine. He had very, very mild symptoms. And this morning he said basically they're pretty much over. But he's just got to go through the quarantine period now. And then we'll have to see if we can't get him a flight home at that time. So it's going to be kind of interesting in the next 5 or 6 days. But just wanted to let you know, keep the prayers going, and we'll get him home here pretty soon. Tonight our speaker is Dr. Doug Petrovich, and he's here to teach us petroglyphs and hydroglyphs. And last time he was here, it was fascinating. So, Dr. Petrovich, it's all yours.
All right, how's my mic? Am I live? I don't seem to be as live, as hot as I was before. Testing? Oh, am I on? Testing 2. Oh, it's better. Okay.
You're on.
All right. All right, good evening, everyone. It's good to be back. I forget how long it's been since I was here last, but it's been a little while. Yeah. It took Pastor Dean to travel to Ukraine at a difficult time in world history to get me here, but whatever it takes. So I'm always ready. I'm always on the call. All right. So tonight is going to be different than Sunday morning. Tonight I'll have my kind of teacher's cap on, and Sunday I'll have on my preacher's suit and tie, and it will be a different flavor altogether. So I want to focus our time tonight on the area of my specialization, which of course is ancient biblical history, including archaeology, and show you something new and exciting that's just come out and that's really important for our understanding of when things happen, and basically to affirm the biblical date for the Exodus and the Conquest and so forth that we can derive from a literal reading of the scriptures, the verses in the Hebrew Bible that attest to and offer very clear designations for what happened on an ancient timeline, which of course the challenge is to tie that with the absolute timeline that we are used to. You know, this is, 2022 AD, and so however far back you want to go, we go back according to our timeline. But in the ancient world, of course, they didn't use that timeline. They just dated things according to, well, usually there was a lunar calendar in the ancient Near East, so they were dating things according to just a monthly cycle, and then they would have, most of the ancient cultures would have a time frame where they would, after several years, they would make up for the difference, because if you just use a lunar calendar, that kind of goes awry after time. It's not like a solar calendar that we use that is based on it, the revolution the revolution of the Earth one time around the sun. So it's a very different dynamic. But anyway, we want to look at the time period of the Conquest. That's the time frame. And tonight we'll do two things. I'll introduce you to this new inscription. Of course, as you know, that's my area of expertise in ancient Near Eastern history. I'm an epigrapher, so I study ancient writings. And this is a really fun inscription. So we'll talk about that first, and then with the time left we have, which will be most of it, we'll talk about the site of Jericho and look at the archaeology there. Because I know you've studied, are you still in Judges here, right? Did you do Joshua right before that? Okay, so I'm taking you one book back from the time frame that you've been focusing on during Sunday mornings. So I'll open us with a word of prayer, and then we'll launch right into it. Lord, thank you for the opportunity this evening that you give us to look into the facts, the evidence, the remnants, including physical artifacts that have been preserved, that you allowed to be preserved for a reason, well, for many reasons probably. And we trust you that your word is true and it's without error. We don't need all of these fun things to believe, because our belief is based on that which we do not see, and faith never changes from that. But it gives us the opportunity to stand back and become more and more in awe of you, and to become more and more excited about seeing what you've done in history that's recorded in your word fleshed out as much as we're able to see it so many thousands of years later. Thank you that with you a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. So time is irrelevant to you. Well, it's relevant, but it's things aren't so contingent on time as they are for us, because we can't see things the way you see things. You are far above and beyond us. And thank you for that, because that actually anchors us. It gives us hope and certainty, because we live in an uncertain world. We don't know what's going to happen next with pandemic outbreaks or with world conquests or whatever, but we do know that you have fixed history according to your plan, according to your timetable for how it will work itself out. And you are in charge of it all, and nothing will thwart your plans. We trust that. We trust you. We love you. Thank you for Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen. All right, so overarching, our focus tonight is evidence of Joshua's conquest. That's just kind of a mantelpiece. We're not going to be looking for thousands of different ways to see that at play, but that's just maybe the more overarching focus with these two areas that we will look at. So the first is what I affectionately call the Lachish Milk Bowl Ostracon, and I have it abbreviated here, of course, as LMBO. It was discovered at the site of Lahish, and where is Lachish located? It is in the Shephelah. For those of you who have been to Israel, you know that essentially means foothills. And the area of the foothills is between east to west, or west to east. It's between the coastal plain and the central mountain spine. So the foothills is the area where it's kind of like a buffer zone, if you will, between the Israelites, once they established themselves in Canaan, especially with the beginning of the monarchy later. It's the area between the Israelites up in the hot hill country, up high, and the coastal plain where the Philistines eventually will be. And they, of course, arrive. The ones we know about arrive in the 13th century BC, and you have the constant battles between Saul and the Philistines, David and the Philistines, until David pretty much subdues them. So in that buffer zone, we have these foothills called the Shephelah, and that's where Lachish is located. And it was on Judah's southern flank. So you remember, of course, and again, later in history, when you have the divided monarchy, right? We start with a united monarchy under Saul and his son Ishbosheth, who rules for a short time, and then David, and then Solomon, and then during the early part of Rehoboam's reign, we have this division, and it never comes back together. So the southern kingdom is the kingdom of Judah, and Judah's southern flank essentially is protected by the city of Lachish. So it becomes an important city in the Israelite period. We're not going to look into that. We're going to focus our attention on the time frame of the conquest, and look at this really important inscription that was found. So here is a view of the tell of Lachish. There are two areas that are highlighted here. That doesn't mean they're the only two areas that have been excavated. There's a lot that's been excavated at Lachish, especially here, the area of the Neo-Assyrian governmental headquarters that was established here when the Neo-Assyrians captured Lachish and destroyed the city and killed most of the they killed most of the men in battle, but the survivors, they killed a lot of them. And does anybody know how most of them were killed? We know this from Sennacherib's reliefs that he had made in and put on the walls in his palace at Nineveh. They're impaled. They're impaled. So imagine like whatever the length is, 12 foot long or more, kind of like a miniature telephone pole or something that's been, whittled on one end and made sharp, and so you're impaled and stuck there until you die, and that probably doesn't take too long. But your body sits there and rots for everyone to see. And this demonstrates, of course, how foolish it is to fight against the Neo-Assyrians, because they're brutal and they win. They're amazing warriors in the ancient world. So anyway, that's where the Neo-Assyrian provincial headquarters was. But we have areas such as this area P and area S. And area S is what we're going to focus on, especially because that's where the inscription was found. But the significance of the location of this area on the tell, and a tell, of course, is it's a Semitic word that means a mound. And of course, in the ancient world, you had to be, if you wanted to survive a long time, you had to be elevated, because the ones who control the high ground are in control. That's how it works, right? Until they're besieged and starved out or whatever. But so it's built on a mound, and you can build a wall around it. And sure enough, that's what happens in the Canaanite city. So this is before the Israelites arrived. There's already a Canaanite wall around the city. There's an inner and an outer wall. So here is the outer wall, and then here is the inner wall. And this inner wall, it cuts right through this, what's called Area S. And of course, Area S, that's just an arbitrary title for this area. That's what the archaeologists assign it, so we just call it the same thing. Every particular area that is excavated has to be designated in some form so that you can have order in the publication of the results that you find. So there's our area that we're going to focus on, Area S. That's where this inscription was found. And of course, think about this. If we're talking about the period of the conquest, right, under the Israelites, and of course the Israelites are invading every city, and their instructions are, right, the blueprint, whether they follow through with it or not is always another question, but the blueprint is for the Israelites to kill off let's see if we can get this going, there we go, every man, woman, and child, and animal, right? That's the instruction from God. They're to do. Because, and this goes back to God's encounter with Abram way back in the day, hundreds of years before, slightly before 2000 BC. God said to Abram that the iniquity of the Canaanite and the Amorite and all of these people in the land has not yet been fulfilled. So, until it is fulfilled, God will wait. So what does he do? He waits hundreds of years. They continue to sin, gross immorality, gross debauchery, wickedness of every form. And so the time eventually comes where God says enough is enough, and he puts his foot down, and he uses the Israelites in this case as the agents of his wrath to take out upon those very, very wicked, sinful people. So that's what they're supposed to do, kill off the people. So, of course, we know of Jericho and Ai. Those are the first two cities that are destroyed by fire. The third one that we know of that's destroyed by fire, that's described as such, is the city of Chatzor up in the north. Time period, we didn't talk about that. And obviously looking at the tell is irrelevant to this, but the time period of the conquest is 1406 to 1400 BC. We talked about that before when I was with you. So this is at the initial part of the conquest, because what the Israelites are going to do, let's see, I guess I'll do this for you. All right, if this is the land of Canaan, they come from the east, and they enter, they cross the Jordan Rift Valley, which we'll be looking at in our discussion of Jericho. They cross the Jordan Rift Valley, they climb up the Judean wilderness and the heights that are there, and they get into the hill country, and they basically cut a path westward. So it's the principle of divide and conquer. That's the easiest way to defeat an enemy, divide and conquer. And that's exactly what the Israelites used under Joshua. They cut a line through Canaan, and then they began the southern campaign, and they took city after city after city in the south. And then when they were done, they moved up into the northern half and went all the way to the north And Hatzor is in the very northern end of the country, almost into modern Lebanon. You can actually hear and see, I was part of the dig at Hatzor, you can see or hear rockets if they're fired from, who is it there, Hezbollah? Is that right? I think it's Hezbollah. But the rockets that are fired, you can sometimes see. In fact, the dig has been stopped at least one time because of the threat of the actual unleashing of rockets from there into Israel. And so Hatzor is in a difficult spot, so it's far up in the north, and so the campaign finishes up in the north, and that's about 1400. So it's 6 to 7 years long of a campaign. But where our site that we're focusing on right now, Lachish, where it fits in this picture is it's one of the earliest sites to be conquered. So we have Jericho and Ai, and then we have what goes on at Gibeon. But of course, the Gibeonites were crafty. They were able to disguise themselves as people from afar and tricked the Israelites into making a covenant with them so that the Israelites would not attack them. They knew that, whoever the God is behind these people, he means business, and it doesn't end well for anyone who opposes them. So they didn't want to be the next in line, and they were able to then, survive through this, and they became water carriers and so forth. But there are other sites then that the Israelites, in their westward movement, began to encounter and to essentially to wipe out the population that's there, because that was their task, their divine task from God. So early in that conquest list, we call it, is the site of Lahish. And it says very specifically that it took the Israelites 2 days to conquer Lachish. And there's one other, I forget which city it is, that's mentioned right near this chronologically, that says that it only took 1 day, and then Lachish, in contrast, takes 2 days. Why? Because Lachish is one of the great cities of the Canaanite world. In fact, it is the greatest city in the late Bronze Age, at least in the southern half of Canaan. And of course, in the north, it's Hatzor. Hatzor is about 4 times larger than Lachish, which is number 2. But Lachish is the largest in the south. So that's why I think it takes 2 days for them to conquer Lachish, because there's much more defense to break through at Lachish. So the inscription we have, it relates to this very time frame. And again, it's in this area that's a part of the city wall. So here is the inscription. It's from late Bronze Age 1B. I don't know. I didn't bring a handout with the Levantine Archaeological Periodization, but at some point before I gave that to you. So if you happen to have that anywhere, you can call on that to look. But that's the time frame that it's from, and then I date it to 1406 BC. It was published summer of last year, summer of 2021, by a team of excavators led by an Austrian scholar named Heffelmeier, Felix Heffelmeier. And when they published this inscription, it's interesting because they got a lot of things right and a few things wrong, and a few things they didn't even touch. They didn't even talk about. And as you can see from what you see on the left here, so this is 2 sides of the same piece of pottery. And when you have a piece of pottery that's broken off, we call it a sherd for short, or a potsherd more formally. And once it's written upon, it becomes something different, at least by name, and that's an ostracon. It becomes an ostracon. If you have more than one, you have 2 or more, it's ostraka. That's Latin ending. That's Greek endings, the a or the on. And so this becomes an ostracon. But what the team that published this inscription didn't even talk about, which to me is mind-boggling, the language of the inscription. Can you imagine that? They didn't even talk about the language of the inscription. And they're publishing it. Guess what, folks? If you publish an inscription, you better talk about the language. Even if you say, we have no idea what the language is behind this inscription. That's okay if nobody knows and you're not ready to make any, educated guesses. But you'd better talk about it. They don't. I will tonight, And so I've written an article. Interesting, an artifact. To impress me, I guess. I've written an article that's just about ready to come out any week in a publication that some of you may know about. It's not, among the top 10 most known, but in the Christian community, it's somewhat known, which is, so ABR, Association for Biblical Research, puts out a journal called Bible and Spade. Anybody know of Bible and Spade? Some of you do? So Bible and Spade will be publishing my article on this inscription any week. It was supposed to come out in November between you and me. So, if you catch this on the internet, don't post that anywhere. Don't get me in trouble. But it's coming out hopefully very soon now on this inscription, and I talk a lot about the language. Now, the excavators, they correctly see and read that there is this is supposed to be horizontal. It's a little bit kind of diagonal, so kind of just, give me the benefit of the doubt. We're going to call it a horizontal inscription, okay? So there's the first horizontal line here, and it reads right to left, and they identify every one of the three letters correctly, and I'm proud of them, and they got the right word for it. It's the word eved in Hebrew, and it means servant. And they also got the last word on it right, which means honey. What's in the middle, this is an anomaly for an epigrapher. What in the world is it doing there, all there by itself in the middle? I'll talk about that maybe in a moment or in a few moments, but I want to focus for now on this word here. This is a two-letter word, so it's broken off. The rest of the word is here, the rest of the letter is here, and it's essentially a circle. So you see a little bit more than half of the circle on the actual Ostracon right here. And this right here, anybody know what this is? Anybody know what that is? It represents something. Because remember, this is pictorial. It's a picture of something. I'll give you a hint. Back in the ancient world, an old guy would use this to get around. Yeah, we would call it a cane, but for them it's a shepherd's crook, right? Or a shepherd's staff. And you use it for, if you're a sheep herder, for prodding your sheep. And of course, according to the Bible, it was used by parents to do what? Discipline their children. Of course, we live in a world that tells us that's not right, but the Bible doesn't see things that way. Spare the rod, spoil the child. That's the biblical understanding. So yeah, that's a shepherd's crook. So this circle, oddly enough, is an eye. And it represents the letter ayin, which is a guttural in Hebrew, and then the second letter represents the L sound, the L sound, because the Hebrew word for teach, it's a verb, lamad, teaching or learning. And it's fascinating because they have the same word for both, right? We would look at it as either two completely different things, but they would look at it as, two different sides of the same coin. The father uses the rod to teach the child. The child benefits from the rod in that he's learning because of the pain he experiences, which makes him realize, I can't do that bad thing again or I'll get whacked with the rod. So, it's the finger on the stovetop kind of concept, right? So that's the L sound together, and the excavators / publishers of the article from last summer, they didn't even identify this word. And I don't know why. It's very easy because there's only a small part broken off and it can only be the rest of a circle, which represents an eye, and there's only a little bit of the staff that's not extant, that's not visible. So it's very simple. And it's a preposition. Al is a preposition. It means on, upon, or over. So anyway, yes, this is a rim sherd from a Cypriot white slip to milk bowl, and that's technical ceramicists' terminology, right? Cypriot means from what place in the ancient world? Anybody know? It's an island. Cyprus, the island of Cyprus. Cypriot means it's an adjectival form for Cyprus. White slip, and you can see there's kind of a, yes, it's tan, I get that, but there's kind of a whiteness to this, right? And the idea with slip, it means it was dipped. Slip equals dip. So if you take a piece of pottery and you dip it in a fluid that is has a dye in it to change the color, to colorize it. So you dip it in and bring it out, and it becomes that color, right? And so it's dipped in a white dye and becomes white. So this is white slip 2. 2 means there was a 1 that there were certain styles of it earlier, and then the later styles from the next period, they change in some small ways, and so it's the second version of this. So it's called white slip 2. And what's ironic is this. Look at the quote from Heffelmeyer. Et al. Means, of course, and others in French. He says this ware, and ware means pottery, right? This ware first appeared during late bronze 1B. And if you have my cheat sheet, you look on it and you see, okay, I see that Dr. P says that late bronze 1B is approximately 1484 BC to 1406 BC. Those are or 1400 BC. Those are my dates for late bronze age 1B. And of course, that's the time period of, the end of it is the time period of the conquest under Joshua. So notice that. They themselves say that this, and I'm quoting verbatim, right, from their article. Notice they say that's when this form, white slip 2, first appears, right? Late bronze 1B. Well, look at this. This is essentially a stratigraphic cutout, if you will, from the overall stratigraphy of the site of Lachish. We're just narrowing in on a little time period, and that little time period is from, at the top, late Bronze Age 1A, up here, right, period, and that's late Bronze Age 1A. It goes all the way down through Iron 1A. Iron 1A is late in the period of, I'm sorry. It's in the period of the Judges, okay? The time frame you're studying, so if whatever you're learning about the book of Judges, if you were to look at artifacts and archaeology related to it, you'd be looking for things in the Iron Age 1A, especially. So, but the excavators, when they write this report, right, and they publish it, they attribute, unlike what I do, they attribute this inscription to going back to late Bronze Age 1A, which doesn't make any sense at all, because they themselves, in the portion of the article earlier that I quoted for you, they mentioned that it's in late Bronze Age 1B that white slip even comes into existence. So it can't date back to late Bronze 1A. It has to date to late Bronze 1B, approximately 1484 to 1400 BC, which again, the conquest fits in that window. So, some of the main architectural features of the area where they excavated this, remember, this is area S, and that's why we have S3C, S3B, S3A, S2, S1, etc. So again, the further up on this list you're looking, the older and older and older it becomes. So S3C is late Bronze Age 1A, which dates approximately from 1560 BC to 1484 BC, right? So at that point, and this is part of, Lachish thrives at different time periods, but one of the time periods that it thrives is late Bronze Age 1, especially late in late Bronze Age 1. But they build a building called Building 100, and it abuts the wall, the city wall. So city wall is designated by them L1220. So those are part of the architectural features that are there, and then elsewhere on the site we see a lot of pits and fills. And what that suggests to us is it started out, okay, the city of Lachish, before we get to the late Bronze Age 1 here, the city thrived during the Middle Bronze Age, but it experienced a devastating destruction at the end of the Middle Bronze Age. And there was a period of fallow, of non-occupation of the site. Then some people start coming in, and pits and fills suggest to us that these are more like squatters at the beginning, right? There's nobody around. They can kind of do what they want, so they find a place on the site that they can settle in, and they cook their food by making pits or whatever, and then putting having a fire down in there, and then they make their food and so forth. And so it's very humble. It has humble beginnings in the Late Bronze Age at the beginning. But soon, as time rolls along, you get more and more people in. It becomes more and more occupied. And you have order now. You have the need for dividing things up. You have manpower to be able to build things. And so they make structures like Building 100 and the city wall. Of course, now you have enough people there that you really need to think seriously about protecting your population, so you build the city wall. So they build or rebuild, whatever the case may be, your city wall. So it became a formidable city, and especially as you move into Late Bronze Age 1B, it becomes a very powerful, large, well-populated city. All right, so I dissent from the excavators, and I assign the inscription to, in its inception, to sometime in Late Bronze Age 1B, because the writing surface only shows up, the white slip 2 only shows up in Late Bronze 1B, so it has to, the inscription can't predate the pottery, can it? I mean, you can talk about magic tricks all you want, put on a hat, and have a rabbit and a wand, but you have to have the pottery first. So I say no, it has to date to Late Bronze 1B. And I note here at the bottom, the Lahish milk bowl Ostracon, located on top of a burnt layer that was sampled for radiocarbon dating. So what that's saying is that the Lahish milk bowl Ostracon was laying on top of charred remains. Laying on top of charred remains. What could be happening at Lachish that would produce charred remains late Bronze Age 1B? Oh, yeah, Joshua was there. That's right. So it was sampled for radiocarbon dating, and I talk about all the radiocarbon dates in my article. It was discovered in Area S at the top of stratum S3B, right? So S3C is here, S3B is here, S3A is here, right? So at the top of S3B means at the end of the occupational phase of SB3, which is Late Bronze 1B. That's where we have the charred remains, and that's where the milk bowl Ostracon is laying on top of the charred remains. The second substratum of the Late Bronze Age 1 at Lachish. The first one is S3C. The Ostracon's find spot is just south of wall L1027, close to that wall's corner with the city wall. We'll see it in a moment, so you know what I'm talking about here. At a level near the city wall's uppermost preserved stones. And here it is. The Ostracon was sealed 1.64 feet below two walls and the fragmentary surface of stratum S3A, the final substratum of the Late Bronze Age 1. So what's that saying? S3A, which comes afterward, which I date to a very short window of time at the very end of Late Bronze Age 1B. That features an area where they were inhabiting the same area in the same place in Area S shortly after the destruction that we see with the charred remains, right? So the Ostracon is below that last little short level where they're doing things. And it's, again, and notice this, that substratum, the excavators report and say, portions of building 100, but no city wall. So what happened was this building, in fact, maybe I'll just, I'll get to it in a minute. This building 100, it was fairly substantive building, but during this last subphase, it wasn't used like it was earlier before the destruction. In fact, they were just using certain parts of certain walls and building things up against them, and again, it's almost more like a squatter's settlement again at this point. That's what it shows. And the really important part here is no city wall. That tells you all kinds of things. You have a small population. You have no desire on the part of no desire or ability. Maybe it's the ability on the people. Maybe they don't have enough manpower to build a city wall or to rebuild the wall if it can be rebuilt, right? So, all that to say, the inscription is below that level. So it can't be dated sometime much after, because all the material that's built over it, and again, when the city was destroyed and somebody came in and decided to rebuild, and again, it's more like squatters than anything else, but it's a small group of people, and they used this area. They probably just threw a bunch of fill on top of the dilapidated remnants that they didn't want to try to, spend all the time to get out of there. So they throw a bunch of fill there and then just build on top of it. So that's evidently what happened here. So that seals, if you will, and they even use the term, that seals the inscription below it. So it has to predate that last short subphase of the Late Bronze Age 1. Okay? So there's no other choice. It has to be in that window of time. So it's Late Bronze Age 1B, no doubt about it, because white slip isn't made before that, and because afterward you have a layer that's built on top of this, and it's also Late Bronze 1B. So the inscription is pegged. It's got to be Late Bronze 1B. There's no way around it, which again is that period of time when the conquest under Joshua takes place according to biblical chronology. All right, does that all make sense? Are you with me? All right, so that's really all we need to look at from this. Now we can move on. And let's go back to the inscription. So what I did, and of course as an epigrapher, I choose my method. There are different methods. You can hand draw with pencil or with whatever, watercolor, with brushes, or whatever you want to do. I choose, because I have no artistic talent whatsoever, maybe second grade level, that's about where it stopped. I choose technology to help me to be able to draw something. So I use PowerPoint. It's a poor man's version of artistry, right? So what I do is I take this picture and I put it up on PowerPoint, and I use the feature that you can draw with, that you have a freehand drawing, and you just click, 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 and you kind of make your own curves. And then when you're done, you finish it off, double-click it, and it now becomes, a shape. And then you have this amazing feature called Edit Points, which is the coolest thing because it allows you to go back and fix what you didn't quite get right. And you can make it totally precise. And then you can even blow it up to 400%, right? Which is a feature of PowerPoint that's wonderful. 400%, and now you're zooming way in on it, and you're even able to be more precise that way. So what I did is I drew every one of the letters that's on the inscription, okay? So imagine that I'm drawing every one of those letters with black. Well, eventually it becomes black. I make it black with PowerPoint, and I fill in with those letters, and that's what I get. That's an exact, precise drawing right over top of the inscription, okay? So there's zero talent, but there's a lot of precision. So that's definitely the inscription as it reads. So our word eved there for servant, and our word nofet here for honey, and this anomaly, which we'll talk about at some point. And then this is where one of my contributions is to suggest we can be certain about the identity of the two letters that comprise one word that's up in the right there. So I finish off the circle with orange, right? I'm projecting what that looks like, the rest of it, and I'm projecting how far this shepherd's staff goes down. So what would have happened is in greater antiquity, after the Ostracon has been painted on, that it was a little bit bigger in size, and so however far it went over here, I don't know, but part of it would have come down like this, right? Down, 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 and then joined together here or whatever and gone down. So there's a little bit, part of it that was originally there after the letters were drawn that just broke off, and the excavators never found it. Probably it will never be found, to be honest with you. Maybe it will come up, but probably not. So I'm superimposing what the rest of the letters are, and they're very clear, very legible, ancient pictographic Hebrew, Proto-Consonantal Hebrew. And again, it's that word al, which means on, upon, or over. So, putting them together, what do we have? Servant on, upon, or over, and we skip the anomaly, and then we go to honey. Servant, on, upon, or over, servant over honey. Over honey, if you are, we go on a trip, all of us, we go to Florida or something, we go on an excursion, and one of you is in charge of the food. You are the person over the food, right? You're over the food. It doesn't mean you're stepping on top of it. It means you're in charge of it for our trip. So that's the idea with the preposition here. This is referring to a person, one man probably, who is designated with a title. And in the ancient world, everybody likes to have a title. His title, servant in charge of honey. Servant in charge of honey. Now, think about this for a minute. What does God say the land, the promised land, is going to be like for the Israelites? Before they ever get there, right? It's all a pipe dream until they get there. But God gives them this little description. He says it's a land, what? Flowing with milk and honey. Well, isn't it interesting, folks, that at the very time when that would start to be fulfilled, you have an inscription on a milk bowl, right? On a milk bowl that mentions a guy who's in charge of honey. Wow. I guess maybe God was right that it was a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, when I put this theory out there, right, people tried to come after me a little bit, and one archaeologist, whom I love dearly, by the way, said to me, "Well, Doug, I'm not so sure about how you're trying to reconstruct this, because the Israelites wouldn't have had enough time, because they had just conquered Jericho and Ai, and did the thing with the near Gibeon, and chased all those people down to the Beit Horon Ridge and all of that, and then we have these battles at places like Lachish. So it's in 1406, and they've only been there probably a couple months or whatever. It's too soon. It's too soon to be able to go out and produce honey, right? It's too soon. So it doesn't make sense what you're projecting. Well, think about it, folks. What was the benefit of the Israelites under their instruction from God? They were to go to city by city, and there's one or two exceptions or three exceptions or whatever. I understand that, but the average city, they're to go in and do what? Are they to destroy, every city they go to and burn it down to the ground? No. What are they supposed to do? Kill the people, and what else? What about the city? Inhabit it, which of course they didn't do, did they, in the beginning? They liked to be nomadic, tent dwellers. So they said, we'll stay away from the cities. Who needs the urban life? Not like Jed Clampett. So they wanted the country life. So that's what they did. But the whole point is, if they don't destroy the city, how can they benefit? Let's say, for example, they do move in. How can they benefit? They just kill the people. Yeah, everything that's left behind, they get. And of course, it's different at Jericho, because God uses that as a lesson for the first fruits, right? The first fruits belong to God. You don't get all the benefits from Jericho. And by the way, tonight we're not going to have time to get to Jericho. Sad to say, somebody talks too much. Anyway, we'll do that my next time with you, a week from tonight. We'll do Jericho, okay? So that will be the plan. Where was I? This was getting good. Oh, milk and honey, yeah. So the Israelites, they were supposed to kill the people, but protect the city and use this and inhabit the city and use everything that's there. So that being the case, apart from Jericho, what happens when they get to a city and they kill the people? They confiscate the goods, and you can't all run around carrying these pots full of this, that, and the other, right? You have to kind of centralize it and put somebody in charge of it, maybe break it down and say, okay, well, the grain, John Doe will be in charge of the grain, and, Jane Smith will be in charge of the this, that, or the other. And then there's one person who's put over the honey. And so they're taking advantage, they're not making their own honeycombs or, doing their own beekeeping. They're just snatching the honey of the people who were there. So this works. Don't tell me it doesn't work. It works. Because they would have had, these people would, and remember, this was spring when the conquest began. They would have had vats full of their goods for eating and drinking and so forth. So one guy, one Israelite, Joshua or whoever, somebody under him says, okay, Frank, you are in charge of honey. Oh, okay. So all the supply of honey, whenever they go into a new city and they conquer, kill the people and then they take the goods, wherever they may find honey, Frank gets those jugs or whatever they have it in. And he puts it all together, and then he figures out how to disperse it at the right time to different people. And I don't know how that worked, but there would have been order involved in all of that because they had so many people. So that's what we have here. We have Frank, the servant, in charge of honey, in the land flowing with milk and honey, as written on a milk bowl. In a land flowing with milk and honey, on a milk bowl. So, pretty neat, right? But there's a little bit more that's kind of exciting related to this. Remember I talked about building 100? Well, you're seeing building 100. This is it, in all its glory. So this goes back, this is Canaanite building 100 from late Bronze Age 1, and it would have been destroyed by the Israelites, IMHO, in my humble opinion. And so first of all, the city wall, notice here, the city wall is L1220, so just so you know, I'm not deceiving you. There it is, 1220. There's the city wall. So the wall, it's extending this way in the picture, right? It's extending this way, wrapping way around the perimeter of the site on the western side. And so basically, the inner side of the city wall is here. That's the inner side of the city wall. The outer side of the city wall is, I don't know. I'm not at the site. I didn't see this, what their excavations revealed, so I'm just guessing. Something like either here is the end of it, or more likely somewhere in here is the end of it. So that's the depth of the wall, theoretically, from here all the way to here. That's the depth of the wall. And it would, again, extend all the way around the site. So building 100 is built right up against that city wall. Well, where was the inscription found? Get this. Okay, you see where the X is? Now, it's not really where the X is because the X is on the floor. But the view here is not a worm's eye, and it's not a bird's eye right from above. It's kind of, I don't know what degree, 45-ish degree angle you're looking at. So it's above the floor, because that's the floor of the late Bronze Age 1A and 1B, early in 1B, occupation, right? So that floor is used by the people, the Canaanites, before the Israelites go in and conquer. But where the X is, if you were to go up from it, straight up, as in toward the sky, just a little ways, you go up a little ways, and that's where it was found. And remember, it's on top of a burn layer, and there was the final short substratum of late Bronze Age 1B that's built on top of that. Okay? So, but notice this. Look at this. And yeah, the excavators did not talk about this in the article. Notice this. We have a hole in the city wall. You see that? That's known as a breach. There is a breach in the city wall. Oh my goodness. There's a breach in... Why would there be a breach in the city wall? The same city wall that wasn't used in the final substratum, right? Why would there be a breach in the wall? Birds? No. And look at this. So this is all 1220, right? We see another 1220 here, right? The line, the arrow is kind of circumventing you to be able to see it completely, but that's 1220. So that's part of the city wall there too. Look at this part of the city wall. You see the dip? See that dip right there? It's not my imagination, is it? No. See that dip? That tells me now you have two features, two anomalies with the city wall. You have the breach, someone burrowing into the wall, and then where the wall ends, you have a dip where people are hopping over or throwing their bodies over or whatever, getting inside at this point. So, isn't it amazing that the inscription would be found right at the point where the breach in the wall took place? So what that tells me is we probably have a scenario something like this, that the guy, Frank, the servant in charge of honey, Frank was part of the crew that when the Israelites on day 2, they finally finished the job to get inside the city so they can go kill the people inside, that Frank was part of the crew, the military crew, that crossed into the city from outside, did the job, and obviously would have left the city probably by the same way they got in. So, breach in and then use the breach out. So possibly on the way in, possibly on the way out, Frank decides, for posterity, what I'm going to do here? And again, yeah, I think it's probably on the way out. People are all dead. There's a release in the tension because there would have been enormous tension while this conflict was just about ready to unravel. And people were going to be, hand-to-hand mortal combat. So it's not the time for kind of, peripheral things. So probably on the way out, tension's removed, people are dead. Frank's about ready to walk out the city wall that, they made this breach to get in. And he pulls out his business card from his pocket. And his business card is the Lachish milk bowl Ostracon. Right? He's been carrying that around to show everybody, look, see what my job is? I'm the servant in charge of honey. But he decides, for posterity, I'm just going to leave this right by, in this house, right by the city wall as a remnant. So they destroy, they do some destruction, maybe not a citywide destruction, but they do some destruction to get in the city to kill the people, which includes something that caused this charred remains, right? So something was burning, at the point right before they were getting in, and then they got in, they did their job with the people, mop-up operations, and they start coming back out. As they're coming back out, now they're charred remains. And Frank drops his business card down on the charred remains and walks out the city. And there it is. And guess what, folks? This inscription is perfect Hebrew. Now, there are only 3 words on it, and not one of those 3 words is exclusive to Hebrew. So my critics, you'll hear my critics out there, if you end up reading my article and then eventually hear people criticizing it, they'll say, well, there's not a distinctively Hebrew word here, so we can't know that it's a Hebrew inscription. Guess what, folks? Let's be a little smarter than that. Follow the yellow brick road, okay? Look at my chart of the evolution, if you will, of the Hebrew script that starts as full pictures and becomes less and less picturesque, picture-oriented as it goes, and becomes more and more abstract. And if you follow that flow, right, you follow the yellow brick road, you follow that flow, you see how the letters are changing over time. And this inscription fits perfectly with that. Those inscriptions that before, you know where they're found? Egypt, 2 places, Egypt and Sinai. Those are the only 2 places they were found until here. It's the same script. So don't tell me it's not Hebrew. Don't tell me it's not Hebrew. And it fits biblical history to a T perfectly. This is Hebrew. The object in the middle, probably, well, it's difficult to know what that is, okay? I'll even be the first to tell you. And of course, I've done all kinds of, thousands of hours of work on inscriptions from the 2nd millennium BC. And even I'm puzzled. But I can say this. My hunch strongly is that it's kind of like a combination of picture and abbreviation at the same time. Because the Israelites, of course, came out of Egypt, and in Egypt, Egyptians often would connect writings with drawings. They're very picture-oriented people. And the Israelites followed that. And in my first book, I just signed a copy of my first book for one of you today. in my first book, I show you a couple inscriptions where we have pictures that are connected with text. And the Israelites followed the model of the Egyptians before them by whenever there was a picture with words somewhere close by, the words every single time 100% are connected to the picture. So probably this is an abbreviation representing like a picture in the middle of the inscription, standing for something, some word that begins with, and this actually is a letter. It's the letter that makes N, the N sound. It's a nachash. A nachash is a snake. So whatever the word is, it begins with an N. And the picture has to be connected to the wording around it. So whatever the picture is, it's probably connected to that, the meaning of that text, which is servant in charge of honey. Servant in charge of honey, picture with an N. Servant in charge of honey, N. Okay, maybe it's the name of the guy who has that title, and his name starts with an N. So, and I list the names in Hebrew that begin with an N that are around this time period, and there are a bunch of them, Nathan and et cetera, a bunch of them that are options. So probably this guy's name starts with an N, and he just puts the letter to represent his name. That's most likely what's going on. Make sense? Okay. So, and then the final slide to show you, and then I want to mention my book to you. The final slide to show you is a drawing, an artist's reconstruction, to show you, it's not your eyes, it's not my eyes, but the artists themselves have seen, the excavators have seen, that there is this breach in the wall, because there are not all of those, this multitude of circles all over the place that represent stones in the city wall. It's all absent here. So there's the breach right there. And of course, the fine spot is here. We're looking from above now, 100% down, bird's eye view. So it's above this point here. And then we had that dip that's in the city wall right here. Remember we saw that dip? So that's how it all works. And then S3A, so the yellow portions here, all these yellow portions, these are walls that were made after the destruction when they reoccupied the site. And you can see they're not repairing the city wall, they're not adding to the city wall, they're not making a new city wall. They're just making rooms. That's all they're doing. They're using an old building. It's like a ghost town. They move in, there's this old building. Oh, let's kind of divide it off. Let's put some partitions in. So that's what these walls represent. Rooms that are made inside this big building 100 so that they can do whatever they want to do inside these rooms. So that is the Lachish Milk Bowl Ostracon. Before we close, I want to show you, some of you already know about this and maybe even have looked into this, but my new book is finally out. And when I came and spoke here before, I talked to you about the very evidence that's in this book. So this is the result of umpteen hours of work that went into, 9 years of research and writing and editing that went into this. So it's finally now published. If you're interested in buying a copy, I have some in the box out there. They're $40 each. You're welcome to buy a copy, and I'll be glad to sign it. I'll stay around as long as it takes and sign your book. So it's called Origins of the Hebrews, New Evidence of Israelites in Egypt, from Joseph to the Exodus. And then if you're interested in this, I don't know if I had these last time I was here or not, but I brought some this time. Tim Mahoney, anybody know that name? Christian filmmaker from Minnesota. Made the Patterns of Evidence films, and he made one on my work identifying Hebrew as the language of the Proto-Consonantal script. So while I was there filming, being interviewed for the film, he decided to have me go to his church and do a 4-part series on, focusing on, lectures basically that talk about how the first alphabet came into existence and why we know it's Hebrew and what important things do we see in the inscriptions. So that 4-part series is in this DVD. This is $10 if you're interested. There on the table in the back too. So, and you can always do an IOU. I'll be here on Sunday. Take it and go. But you're welcome to those if you're interested. So any final questions maybe anybody has before I close this in prayer? About the Ostracon. Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm.
Could that possibly be the person's rank? If he was some kind of
possible. We don't really know of ranks, even, well, we know of different titles that are ranked in Egypt, but yeah, I mean, the Israelites are probably going to be far less complex, so I wouldn't assume there's a rank involved. I can't rule it out, so it's possible, but I think it's far more likely that it's a name, but it's possible. I mean, at the end of the day, all he needs is his title. That's his job title, job description. Okay, let's close in prayer. Lord, thank you for the opportunity that you gave us to look at the Lachish milk-bowl ostracon. What a fun, exciting new discovery, just published within this last, 9 months, so it's within a year. And it's really neat to see how it ties in together with biblical history and fits with the destruction that took place under Joshua. And Lord, we can't guarantee that this is the right connection, but boy, everything lines up perfectly for it, and it makes perfect sense. And the timing is right, the place is right, what happens to the city is right, and an inscription by the very people who lived in Egypt for 400 plus years. In that script, to find an inscription from the time frame when the Bible says that the Israelites went in and conquered, it just is, it's a perfect match. So thank you for allowing us to see a window into time for preserving this so that it can be a witness and a testimony for people to come to terms with how the Bible is historically accurate, literally true, and most importantly, demonstrates your powerful acts of greatness, intervening in human history, as it were, to accomplish great things for the glory of the name He who is, the one who goes on existing, the covenant name you gave to Moses, by which they would know of you for all generations. Thank you for revealing all of this to us for your own glory and for your honor, because we want to see your name made great on planet Earth. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everyone.